The king is moving on. Welcome into the Illini Inquirer podcast. I'm Jeremy Werner. Joey Wagner with me to start things off with a big news day as Kofi Cockburn announces he will enter the 2022 NBA draft, ending his 3-year legendary Illini career. We're going to talk with LaTulip after this as well. Joey, we got so much to talk to about Kofi going pro, reflecting on one of the greatest Illini basketball careers ever, and of course, looking forward to what does life without Kofi look like for Illinois? But I'm just going to give you the floor right away, Joey. Reaction to Kofi Cockburn deciding he's going to bet on himself and go pro.
I didn't expect it to be before my first cup of coffee this morning. I don't know. I mean, obviously, this was coming at some point, right? And NIL made it a conversation even for him to come back this year and really for the last year. I mean, NIL kind of sparked the last year of Kofi and allowed him to make it, feasible to come back in his eyes. But Kofi's whole basketball journey, from coming to America from Jamaica, from going to Illinois, this has been about chasing his dream, right? It's been about betting on himself. He didn't even, just picking up the game. He was following his brother, betting that he could do it, right? So all of this kind of makes sense that his next step is to bet on himself and try the NBA. And we don't know how it's going to work. We just don't. He's not projected in a lot of mock drafts. We'll see how these things fluctuate, Jeremy. We know that. It's April 20th right now. I don't know how much they're going to fluctuate in his favor to climb up, but that, we'll see how that goes. But that's been his story, to bet on himself, to trust himself, to take the risk and make it work. And it is a risk, and it's inherently a risk anytime anybody goes pro who's not projected in the lottery or even in that back end of the first round. It's just what it is. The NBA draft is 2 rounds, man. There's not a lot of space there to take every really good college player. So, we'll see how it works, but not surprising. It's some people don't want to be in college at the age of 23. I can't remember. I'm sure I wasn't. Maybe I was. I don't know. I don't know if you were. You want to move on, man. You want to make that jump. You want to be a professional and go and do those things.
Yeah, Joey, I was living in a fraternity house my last 3 years of college, and I had a blast, right? But by my senior year, when there was I was hanging around a bunch of 18, 19-year-olds, I was like, I think I'm done with this. That's why, I even imagine Jacob Grandison at 24, being like, man, do I want to be around a bunch of 18 and 19-year-olds, or I just want to move on with my life?
Almost exclusively, right? They're so young.
It's almost like a different generation, but I don't know. If you disagree, if you were in Kofi's place and you said, man, I can make, 500,000, $1 million. I don't know. We don't know what the NIL figures would have been for Kofi Cockburn, but he could have made guaranteed more money. Today, he's guaranteed a lot of money if he wanted to come back to college. He's not guaranteed that by going pro, but what's the downside of Kofi Cockburn going pro? A really good overseas contract that's paying him 6 figures. The most likely seems like a 2-way deal, right? That pays him annually $500,000. We know that's not guaranteed. Or if he's a second round pick, Joey, say some team loves him as just kind of a change up backup center. Maybe he gets, the minimum deal in the NBA, which is $1 million, and he'd have a chance at his dream. He was going to do this at some point. He decides, man, I can't accomplish anything left in college. He basically said that, in his statement today, is there's not much more individually he can accomplish in college. And there's not much more he can do for Illinois, right? I mean, the picture of Kofi Cockburn, I remember him sitting there watching Illinois flounder, and I would assume it was first year, and lose to Florida Atlantic. And I think they fell to 4-11 at that point. And it was like, man, why would that guy want to come here? Kevin Ollie and UConn look pretty good right now. Little did we know what would happen with Kevin Ollie and UConn and what would happen with Brad Underwood once he got Kofi Cockburn. I mean, the juxtaposition of life before Kofi and life with Kofi couldn't be more stark, right? I mean, you're a bottom half of the Big Ten team without him in the first couple of years under Brad Underwood as he builds this thing up. And then Kofi gets here. And he's not the only reason, right? But he's a huge, huge reason of why Illinois basketball is now one of the top programs in the country. And the fact that you got a 3rd year out of him, Joey, was really fortunate. NIL could not have been timed up better for Illinois to do that. And it just prolonged this period of a great run for Illinois basketball. And my big picture thing is him being here for 3 years and being here for that third year just set you up to where you're now expected to be a great team. And I think that extra year of Kofi Cockburn, despite not leading to the NCAA tournament success, but to win a Big Ten championship, to win as many Big Ten games as you did, and to be ranked as long as you were, it just prolonged your relevancy to where life after Kofi, which is a scary thing, you're set up better now for an extra year, a third year of Kofi Cockburn than you were before. And he's one of the all-time greats, right? We know he's 12th in scoring, even though he only played 3 years. He's third in rebounding, despite only playing 3 years. He's one of the most dominating forces we've ever seen in a Illini uniform. And I don't think we're ever going to see an Illini like him again. Like, I just, the type of player, the force, 7 foot, 285, the jovial attitude he had. He was a joy to watch. And I think we said throughout his career, like, savor this, right? Savor this, because there's probably never going to be another like him.
Yeah, something about Andy Bernard saying you wish you know you're in the good old days before they're gone. I mean, that's the thing. I find myself when we say those big things, like you'll never see another one like him, I find myself, my first reaction is, well, pump the brakes, but then it's really true, right? Like if you step back and realize it, I mean, it feels weird the day he's declared he's out of here to say those things. You want to usually let a little bit of that, ruminate, I guess is the word. I'm not very good with words.
Marinate.
Marinate, there it is. Man, that's good. You want to let a little bit of that happen before you start making those. But Kofi was the guy that you can feel pretty comfortable about making those statements. One, physically. I mean, there are not a lot of guys like him physically. It's what helped him be in the conversation we're having right now. And yeah, just everything. He was really good for this program, man. This program needed people, and he wasn't the only one. Io, Trent, they needed people to make it cool to like Illinois again. They made it, they needed people to kind of gravitate a fan base and pull them all together that like really didn't, I don't say they lost interest. Illinois basketball fans don't lose interest, but that was not the most fun time in those first couple of Brad Underwood years. And the record with and without Kofi, a lot of that is Kofi, and a lot of it also coincides with Brad's building of this thing back up into a national power. But yeah, it's that third year made, especially that third year, just given, now he kind of passes the torch to this guard heavy class, if you will, to Coleman Hawkins, to RJ Melendez, to Luke Goody. But it made it more palatable to say, okay, he's moving on. If you would have said that after his freshman year, remember that was also when Io was, at least entertaining the idea of going pro, you probably would have been nauseous.
I thought Io was gone after his sophomore year. Like, and if it weren't for the pandemic, he probably would have been, right? So the fact that you got 3 years of each of those guys just gave Brad Underwood, who deserves a lot of credit for recruiting those guys, developing those guys, all of it. But it just gave Brad Underwood such a great foundation to turn that into a top 10 recruited class this year, to turn it into 2024, where you have 2 great recruits already on board. It gave you that platform that, hey, the expectation is Illinois basketball is going to be relevant every year. They're going to be in Big Ten title contention every year. Now we'll get into the conversation of what it looks like next year, but like the fact that you got 3 years of those guys is unbelievable in this day and age, but it could become more realistic now moving forward. I think even the conversation of Kofi potentially coming back for a 4-year really talk to the power of NIL, and even him coming back for a 3rd year, talk to the power of NIL and how it just gives these guys more options, more palatable options, and gives programs a chance to keep borderline NBA prospects in their program. Yeah,
I mean, Kofi didn't outright say when I remember talking to him, remember this at Ubben, Jeremy, when he announced he was coming back, which was much, much later in the calendar year, a year ago, by the way. We didn't come out and say NIL is the only reason, because I don't know that only is exactly the right word, but NIL was a reason, and it's changed. I mean, we've seen, I think now that we get into the summer and like the football and basketball, you're going to see a lot more people diving into what impact NIL had.
And what is NIL?
Yeah, there was a really good thread. I'm sure you saw it on Twitter, and
yeah,
I do agree. I mean, calling it NIL in every instance is probably a stretch. But regardless, the end outcome is the same as money and in kids' pockets. So yeah, man, it changed a lot. And Illinois, I think, showed that they've got the pieces in place to be a player, to have the Illinois Guardians kind of, it didn't work, right? I mean, the pitch didn't bring Kofi back for a fourth year, but they made it a conversation. I think those pieces, they have a plan. The Guardians have a plan. They clearly have, the interest in being a big player in this. And, we'll see how that all shakes out moving forward, but it's changed the game. We know that. No one's learning that right now on April 20th, 2022, that it's changed the game. It's, we'll see how much, but man, Kofi, I spent a little time this morning just trying to, Kofi was awesome here. And it's so much that he had these crazy games. I don't even know what his best game was, because it was just oh yeah, ho hum, another 20 and 10.
Had to be Wisconsin, right? This
year?
past year, 37 and 14.
Was that the snow game?
Yeah.
Oh God, he pulverized him.
Yeah. I mean, he had huge performances against, in the NCAA tournament stuff, and we'll get into what Illinois, how they play, and it could be, better for them in a certain way without Cockburn kind of being this low post fulcrum. But the fact that you had that guy every night was a problem. Hunter Dickinson is going to be so happy Kofi Cockburn is moving on. There's just so many players. You could go up against Hunter Dickinson, who I think is one of the best players in college basketball. I felt dirty not having him on the All Big Ten first team. I know Illinois fans don't like him, but you don't like him partly because he's good. You also, he hasn't played very well, or hasn't played you all that well. So I understand those things, but Cockburn just completely erased him, right? Just completely erased him when they played. So you won't have that anymore. And it was just such a great thing to have when you have that player. And he obviously had so much impact on winning. 68 wins the last 3 years, 46 and 14 in the Big Ten. And he was just such a huge part of that. And Joey, it's going to be really interesting to see, how the NBA values him. He's not going to be a first round pick, right? I mean, you watch guys like Christian Koloko, who translates more to today's NBA because he's got defensive versatility. For me, it's not the offensive questions with Kofi, because he can dunk. There is a space for a guy who can just be a low post, slam at home kind of guy. And he's got some skill on the low post. For me, it's the defensive questions. Can he hedge ball screens? Can he guard in an NBA where they are just, they can take you out to 25 feet and they're going to test big men. They're going to attack big men. We saw people do that against Illinois at the college level and sometimes caused him problems. So it's going to be fascinating to see how they value him. But I do think if Kofi improves defensively, I do think there can be a role for him in the NBA with the right team, the right fit. And we've seen how important that is for a guy like Ayo Dosunmu. But this is an NBA that hasn't valued guys like Kofi Cockburn that much. And there's not a guys like Kofi Cockburn in the NBA. So it's going to be fascinating to see the draft process for him and if he can latch on. I do think an NBA team, he'll interview well. I do think his work ethic will do well. But it's going to be interesting to see what changes he can make to his game and if the NBA does ask him to make any changes.
Yeah, and I think in the ESPN article, he chatted with them before he announced. He acknowledged a lot of those things. He knows he's going to have to change his body and kind of understands what he needs to do. But I'm with you, Jeremy. Defensively, that's everything that this is a concern. You can ask how people are going to match up against him, and it's going to be not quite the stark difference that it was when he was playing in the Big Ten. But he's still going to be a problem for people to cover in the NBA. But yeah, defensively, where's it go? I also don't think, and I know we talked about this earlier, overseas are going to be an option. They're an option for a lot of people, but I expect him to kick the tires on the NBA for probably more than a year. I don't anticipate he just tries it for a year and whether that ends up on a two-way deal or in the G League and just washes his hands and plays elsewhere. This matters to him. The NBA matters to Kofi Cockburn, and I think he's going to see that process out, and we'll see how it goes. But yeah, it's different. He's 25 years ago. You're not even getting Kofi for a sophomore year. Seriously, but it's changed. The NBA's changed, and but
I think of a guy like Mike Sweetney that went in the first lottery not that long ago. It feels like, to me, it was a half a lifetime ago for me, but a generation ago, Kofi might be a guy that gets a first round pick. 40 years ago, he's certainly a very high draft pick. But in today's NBA, he mentioned guys in the ESPN article you're talking about with Jonathan Givony, who does a great job. ESPN ranks him 89th in this draft. Now, maybe you can go up a little bit, but how much more are you as the 14th center right now is going to be interesting. But he mentions guys like Steven Adams, Jonas Valanciunas. Adams is a good example, I think, of what he should aspire to be. Adams is a little bit more, quicker than what he was. He's a little bit longer coming out, known as a defensive force. But I do like that he's like, hey, that's got to be my role. Setting screens, pick and roll game, rim runner. He's not going to get the ball on the block and create for himself that much. He's got to get his points. He's got to get his offense in different ways. So it's not surprising because Kofi, I think, understands, like Io, what he's got to do to succeed in the NBA. But that's a good thing to see, that he's not going in there thinking I'm Shaq.
I think it helps having Io doing, like, those two are close. I think it helps having Io at some point in the process. I'm sure those two, if they haven't already, will talk. And Io knows. I mean, Io sacrificed, maybe not sacrificed. I mean, he fit into the role. Let's say that he knew what role and those two are kind of cut from the same cloth in terms of knowing what they need to do on the basketball floor. And Io knew what his role was. And I think he'll tell Kofi the same, like, hey, fit into what you got to do. And maybe it's not going to be what you've done for the last 3 years. It certainly wasn't what I had done for the last 3 years, but playing in the NBA, starting NBA games, getting a paycheck, I'm in the playoffs like that. You can't really have a better example than that, can you?
Yeah. All right, Joey, let's talk about life after Kofi. I think there's a lot of Illinois fans. I think most Illinois fans are like, hey, good for you, Kofi. I also think there is a bit of an excitement for what is a huge reset, but I think the lack of NCAA tournament success has got Illinois fans thinking, and we've thought about it as well, is a more open style, more versatile style going to lead to more success for the long term? So I do think there's an excitement about newness, right? Especially when you have talent coming in. This isn't like, Darren Williams, D Brown, James Augustine leave, and it's like, oh, who do we have coming up? You have a top 10 recruiting class coming in. You have Coleman Hawkins, who, for my money, during the last month of the season was the second best player on this team. And then RJ Melendez, who we've seen, especially late in the season, have flashes of he can be one of those guys who can be the next step. But you do have a huge hole that you are filling on the interior, and we haven't seen Dane Danger play much college basketball. He's played 9 minutes of college basketball, but he's a former top 100 prospect, right? So there's at least an upside there. And then you have all these guards, Sky Clark and Sincere Harris and Jade Nepps coming in, Luke Goody. So you're a much younger team. You're a less experienced team, but they still have a lot of work to do, right? But there is, I think, an excitement, Joey, of, playing more like the teams you've struggled with, like Houston, a team that can switch more defensively, a team that can go 5 out and be really dangerous and open up some driving lanes for guards, maybe have more shooters on the court at the same time. So, well, I think we got to remember that if you are really excited about a new era, it's going to be maybe a struggle in December and January, but for the long term, this could be really interesting to see how this plays out and how Brad Underwood decides to play without Kofi Cockburn, right? This is a scary thing, but it's also an exciting thing to see what Brad Underwood has in store, not only from a roster standpoint, but a style of play standpoint.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, the unknown is exciting. I don't know that I, just in my way of life, am one of those people, but I understand the intrigue, I guess, where you would, exactly those things you talked about, the 5 out. I'm a person who likes to know where the floor is.
Yeah, and if you had Kofi back, you're a top 5 team in the Big Ten.
Yes.
Now, could Illinois finish 10th next year? Could Illinois finish 4th next year? I don't know.
What a gamble. This is going to be something. But yeah, could your ceiling be higher with a quote unquote modern offense? Yeah. Your ceiling could also be pretty high with Kofi, and that also comes with a high floor. So it just depends on what kind of fan. I don't know that one way of thinking is right or wrong or better than the other way of thinking. It just depends on how you view your fandom in terms of kind of getting what you know versus, hey, this could be something like you saw with Michigan. Michigan to me like makes a lot of sense and parallels here a little bit. Like they had a lot of talented players and it took them a while. Like even in February, it was like, okay, what's going on in Ann Arbor? And look where they ended up, which was one more game, but it was one more week. We've talked a million times that week. Go ahead.
Yeah. And then the other comp is Iowa. They lose this all-time great player in Luka Garza. And I was thinking, plus CJ Frederick and Joe Wieskamp. And I'm thinking, man, no way. This is going to be a rebuilding year. I like Keegan Murray. I think he's going to be good. Didn't know he's going to be this good, right? And I don't know if RJ Melendez can live up to what Keegan Murray did, but they reset. They played a different way, Joey. They played better defensively. The versatility they had to play defensively, and they were still really dangerous offensively. They could play that 5 out, and it was really hard for Michigan or some of these teams with, kind of these traditional big men to defend. So I'm sure Brad Underwood's a little bit excited about this, but we talk about Big Ten finish. I think Illini fans, given what's happened the last 3 years, given the talent that is coming in, this thing isn't falling off the cliff, right? So I think some people are okay with, hey, if we just make the tournament, but it's exciting and we're going in with some momentum and we have a different style of play, maybe that's the year you get to the Sweet 16 or even further. But, long term, this program's still in a good position. So a fall off outside of the top 5, I don't think is as concerning because you're going to be good, but there's also the upside that maybe this team retooled, playing a different way, could still be a really good team like Iowa surprisingly was last year.
Yeah, I'm really interested. And I'm sure Brad likes the challenge of reimagining what he wants to do offensively. I'm sure him, Chester, Jeff, and Tim are sitting in there and trying to figure out what this is going to be. And I would also like to officially usher in the Brad Underwood, no one believes in us, we lost everybody, chip on the shoulder for these freshmen who are going to learn quickly that Brad can find a chip to put on their shoulder. Because that's going to be, he's like, there's talent. There's no doubt in the world. There's talent there. And we expect them to get into the portal. I know we'll get into that, Jeremy, and add some more talent. I think we'd be foolish not to think that. There's open scholarships. Open scholarships don't sit there forever. So we'll see how that plays out, but I can already hear, that line of thinking. Everybody thinks Illinois is falling off. No, we're just you can hear it. That's fine.
Okay, let's talk about this. Depending on who they add in the portal, they're going to be picked 7th, 8th, 9th, most likely. So
understandably too, right? Like I don't think that's a knock on anybody. And again, the portal can change that.
I would be shocked if they're picked in the top 5.
Yeah, and every line will be the same. They lost Kofi Cockburn, they lost Andre Curbelo, they lost Trent Frazier, DeMonte Williams, Alfonso. I get why.
Yeah, let's go over the numbers here. They lost 84.5% of their scoring if Jacob Grandison moves on. 85% of your scoring, 81% of your minutes played, 6 of your top 7 starters, right? Or 6 of your top 7 minutes guys. And that's assuming Jacob Grandison moves on here, which 24 years old. I don't know if he'll come back or not, but 148 of your 165 starts from last year. So I don't think that's anyone hating on Illinois or overlooking a bunch of freshmen. Maybe some people pick them to finish 6th or whatever. Maybe somebody picks them 4th or 5th. I don't know, but you're not going to be picked as a Big Ten title contender, right? So because you're losing all of that, but doesn't mean anything. Michigan was, picked to finish 1st. Wisconsin was picked to finish 10th. Iowa was picked to finish, I think, 8th or 9th in the league. But you got talent coming in, but the expectations certainly are lower on the regular season next year. But it's going to be fun to watch a team like this grow. It's kind of like 3 years ago, right? When Iowa was a sophomore, Kofi was a freshman. There's an excitement there because you have a high level of talent.
Yeah, I agree with that. And they have 5 guys who have worn an Illinois basketball jersey on their roster that have played in a game. And no offense to them, but one of them is Brandon Lieb, who really hadn't logged meaningful minutes. And 2 of those guys are going to be sophomores, and RJ Melendez and Luke Goody. And you have Coleman Hawkins and Benjamin Bosman's Verdonk. So it's not like, this is, you don't want to call it the new era, but you do a little bit want to call it that, because this is a massive change. And it also speaks a lot, Jeremy, to your point of where Brad and his coaching staff have taken this thing. Like if this were the exact same situation, Jeremy, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, would we be having this conversation where we say, hey, yeah, there'll be some growing pains, but long term they'll still be okay, because that's kind of what we've grown to expect this program to be under Brad Underwood. It's a very weird thing to say. It feels so weird to say.
Yeah.
And it's also to the point that when we read all those preseason projections in 5-6 months, I don't think any of us are going to look at it and be like, wow, what a take. 7th. Oof. What? No, man. And every line's going to be the exact same thing you just regurgitated. Not to take anyone away from reading preseason projections, but this is what you're going to read about Illinois in 6 or 7 months, I promise you.
Yeah. But yeah, I just think there's a level of confidence in what they've been able to do and the roster they've been able to put together. And I think adding Sky Clark certainly adds a lot to that. And then, Joey, of course, they're going to add more here, right? Like they're going to add more, and it'll be very interesting to see. But I think we know they want to add one more guard, right? And they're going to have to add some kind of front court option. I don't think they're looking for the next Kofi Cockburn, because he's not out there. We know they've been interested in Manny Bates from NC State, who is an elite rim protector, missed last year due to an injury. He certainly could make sense next to Dane Danger, with Dane Danger next to Coleman Hawkins. I think a stretch for like Ben Vanderplas makes a ton of sense. Now, he's got a lot of great options, but somebody who can initiate offense, play solid defense, rebound, but play next to Dane Danger, play next to Coleman Hawkins. I think that kind of piece makes a lot of sense. I know we're fascinated with Bryce Hopkins as a former in-state guy. I think he could work next to Coleman Hawkins. I'm not sure he's a great fit next to Dane Danger, because he hasn't shown himself as a great shooter yet, but that's certainly a talented piece. And there's going to be more options, right? So I know everyone wants to know who's the next guy, what's the buzz on the next guy. I think that's still got to be playing out. But the one thing I can say with certainty, this is going to be a 20-minute plus a game role. That's got to be very, very attractive to any kind of front court option that's out there.
Yeah, absolutely it will. And, I'm really interested in how they do this, because I have long been, well, I should say for 4 months, I've been on the Coleman Hawkins spurts at the 5 bus, because I love that lineup. I don't know if I'd love it for 25 minutes in a game, but I love what they're able to do there. So I'm just interested in how Brad goes about what they're looking for in that, because I agree with you. I think front court, you certainly have to address it, because you don't have a lot of proven commodities. And, it looks like Dane Danger has done a good job in the last 4 or 5 months of kind of reshaping himself. And I think that's kind of like the only way to exist if you're with Adam Fletcher every day. But
right. But like can Illinois count on him playing 25 minutes a game and being good? And like you can't, like we would have thought the same about Omar Payne at this point last year. And they got to add another option with Coleman Hawkins. And I would put Ty Rodgers into that mix as kind of a smaller 4, but a good college Big Ten 4. I'm excited about what they can do there, but there's a lot of versatility, right? I think we know Sky Clark and Jaden Epps are going to play lots of minutes as a freshman. I think we know they're going to add some kind of guard, veteran guard who can score and defend a little bit.
Maybe a shooter.
Yeah, to the backcourt. RJ Melendez can play the 2 if you need it. And that'd be a long lineup. We know Coleman Hawkins, Ty Rodgers will be a big part of this. Luke Goody will play some, if Jacob Grandis is not back, probably just slides into that kind of role. So there's a lot of versatility and there's a lot of competition, and maybe you can go a little bit deeper, but they certainly, I think, need to add 2 pieces. There's 3 scholarships open right now, assuming Hutcherson and Grandison aren't back. And I know Brad Underwood likes to keep that mid-year one available in case of a mid-year option like Dane Danger. So two more definitely seems likely. 3 more seems a possibility.
Yeah, and to your point, 25 minutes in the Big Ten, 25 minutes a game in the Big Ten, that'll play. That's an attractive pitch at a place where NIL is there, and this is a fan base that is not afraid to pour into these guys. So I think I'm really curious how they do that, and look, we don't know. Kofi's camp is, and this has been kind of quiet for a little bit. We don't know how long Brad and his coaching staff have really known this was the play. So we don't know how far along they are. I mean, we know they're prepared enough that I can't imagine today they woke up this morning or even last night and like, oh boy, better see what's out there in the portal. They're prepared. They've if they didn't know for sure, they've at least it's your job to at least kick the tires and evaluate what's out there.
And they have been, because they've reached out to a lot of these guys. The other part is they've probably done some background work of who could enter the portal, right? Like there's still plenty of days left here or more options. And maybe somebody just saw, hey, Kofi Cockburn just left Illinois. I'd like that role. I could play in that team in that league. So we'll see what happens there. Last thing I want to say, Joey, Kofi Cockburn was one of the best we've ever covered. Not just talent wise, but as somebody that deals with the media, Kofi was always great. He was always energetic about it. So I just want to give a shout out to him because Io was great. He's great. Andre Curbelo is fantastic, but Illinois basketball, we've had some guys that have been tough. DeMonte Williams being the top one, but Kofi Cockburn was always a joy to cover, man.
Yeah, man. He was patient with us. Like, come on, dude, those scrums, there are some stupid questions thrown out there in every scrum across. They are. That's not. It's just that's part of it. And I've asked them. You've asked them. We've all asked them. I mean, that's part of it. But Kofi was patient with us. That understood that that's not the norm. It's not 100 stupid. And he was just funny. It was a good quote. He was honest. Think back to his sophomore year, Io's junior. I guess that was all on Zoom. Maybe that's not the best.
Yeah.
Zoom stunk. But Kofi's freshman year, Io's sophomore year, it was those two, and Andres Felice was part of that. That was just a good, I think Alan Griffin, if I remember right, was a good quote. Like, I know no one cares. Like, they just want to see what's on the basketball court. But for us, good quotes were awesome. And Kofi was the best. He was reflective on things, and he understood I am really struggling finding the right words this morning, but he understood just kind of the big picture of everything. He was a blast. It was truly, truly fun to cover that guy, and almost for more reasons off the court than it was watching him be really good at basketball on the court.
All right, Joey Wagner, thank you as always. It's going to be an interesting offseason moving forward, and we'll cover the heck out of it. Thanks, man.
See you, man.
All right, when there's big news, we got to pull in the big guns, and that's what we did with Michael Tupe, Illini Inquirer basketball analyst, former Illini and Wright State player. Let's just get into it, Mike. Kofi Cockburn decides to go pro, ending a 3-year run, unlike really any other. The way he played, the success he brought, the impact he had on the program. So just take this wherever you want to go with Kofi Cockburn deciding to go pro.
Yeah, I think anybody would have signed up for another year, right? It's another year of a first-team All-American. I think it certainly raises your floor, at the very least, to win another Big Ten title. But I think he's certainly earned the right at this point to decide to choose a new journey and decide to kind of start out on a new path. So certainly don't fault him for that. And I think for the most part, fans understand that too. I think when you can look back with perspective and understand all that he's done for the program. And, I mentioned it early today, he was a big part of a lot of those wins that you got over these past 3 years. So certainly don't fault him for starting a new journey. And he's able to hang 2 banners in his time in Illinois in 3 years. And regardless of the personal accolades, that's a success alone right there. So I'm excited to kind of see what's next, because I think just bird's eye view, Illinois, not Illinois fan, whatever you are, it's going to be a curious case to see what happens with him and his NBA prospects, because he's kind of the enigma, right? How does he fit in? Where does he fit in? Does he fit in? And I think seeing that play out over these next couple of years is going to be interesting.
What is his path to an NBA role? I think we know he's not going to be a star in the league. And I like that he kind of admitted that in his story with ESPN. He was talking about Steven Adams and Jonas Valanciunas, 2 very good players who made a lot of money in the NBA. And I don't know if those are the perfect comps for him, but what is his path to finding a way to stick in the NBA?
It's going to be tough, just like it is for anybody. I think ultimately, you mentioned Valanciunas, you mentioned Steven Adams, and the first thing when you think of both those guys, when you think of those guys, the first thing that comes to your mind isn't scoring.
Yep.
Valanciunas can do it. He's proven that he can do it. He's 17 and 13 last year. So I think if you're Kofi, but here's the other thing. I mean, Valanciunas rebounds at just about as high of a level as anybody in the NBA. He had 13 offensive rebounds the other night against Phoenix, and Steven Adams, same type of thing. But you have to, when you're assessing your pro prospects, you have to really look yourself in the mirror and say, if you take away my ability to score the basketball at the collegiate level, what's the value? Like, where does that come in? And I think that's where certain guys, when you look at, their ability to take that next step into the league. I mean, look at a guy like, and maybe this isn't the best example, but look at Nick Claxton and what he's doing for the Brooklyn Nets. And I think ultimately for him, he was this guy at Georgia that was kind of like ball in your hands, do it all in a sense. And then you get to the NBA and you realize, man, we have Kevin Durant, we have Kyrie Irving, we have all these different guys. So what's my value? Now he became just a run and jump, protect the rim, be good in ball screens. And that's the step for Kofi is, are you potent in ball screens? Because that's a lot of the NBA. We've talked about it before. This isn't Devontae Jones coming off these ball screens anymore. It's Steph Curry, it's Dame Lillard, it's Ja Morant, it's Jordan Poole. So that's going to be the curious case in it all. And I think now you see with the NBA, there's a lot of ways to get there. There's more ways to get there now than there was before. The other side of that is just there's a little bit more longevity with these players. So less spots, but also kind of more ways to eventually get there. So the two-way path, I think the two-way has been one of the better things that the NBA has done over the years, particularly with the draft process, where you can allow these players to come in and kind of dip their toes into the water. And it's low risk for teams too, to not have to spend a first round pick or even a second round pick on some of these players. You sign them to a two-way, and that's kind of you figuring it out without having to invest a ton in them. But it's still, for the Malcolm Hills of the world too, it's still good to get that exposure. And I know it's not going to be as COVID prevalent, or at least you hope that it's not. But like I said, I mean, I think he is a guy that if he works at it, right, if he utilizes that work ethic, if he kind of stays the course and understands that it's going to be an uphill battle, he can do it. Like, I wouldn't be surprised to see him wear an NBA jersey in the next 5 years. He's certainly capable of it. He's still raw in some aspects of his game, but as is right now, it's going to be tough. Like, he has to change some things. He has to get better at some things. And I think he's certainly capable of doing it.
All right, Mike. So at some point you're going to have life without Kofi, and it hasn't been successful recently without Kofi. First 2 years of Brad Underwood, of course, there was a lot of things going on, rebuilding a program. What do you think basketball, the style of play, looks like post Kofi Cockburn, who was the center of everything they did and had to be because of some of his deficiencies, but also because of his strengths?
Well, it's going to be different. It's going to be a lot different. And when I say that, you can play a little bit quicker. You can play a little bit more around the arc, as I'd say, having a Dane Danger or Coleman Hawkins, or even if you go and pick someone else up out of the portal, kind of stepping out into that 5-out scenario where you can get more lanes for cutting, more lanes for driving. And now when you bring in a lot of guard talent, especially with this recruiting class, that's great. I look at Sky, I look at Jaden Epps, and these guys that can get downhill and have that quick twitch. And it's nice to be able to have an open lane. Now, I don't want to come off like it's, oh man, he's gone. All right, now we can finally play the way we want. But it's different. And I think when it comes to March and when it comes to simply being game planned for, it's a much tougher game plan now to game plan for Illinois. But the flip side of that is Illinois is going to have to figure some things out too, especially as the season starts. I mean, you can look and say, hey, this is what we're going to do in the offseason. We want this role for this guy, this role for that guy. But then it's on the player to step into that role, not only just in practice, but when the lights come on. And I think it's going to be very similar to, we talked about it, Michigan and some of these teams that lose a big piece like that. The role identification aspect of it, it's going to take time. You may be sitting in December thinking, all right, well,
missing Kofi Cockburn. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. You may be sitting in December or January thinking, man, is this is this the team we thought this was going to be? And then February and March, they hit their stride, just like Michigan did this year. So I know Michigan had Hunter Dickinson. I know Diabate, they have a lot of talent, but I think Illinois is still in a position with the guys coming in, with the development of the guys that are there, and with needs that you can address in the portal, you can certainly be in that position too. So now do I think the preseason expectations with Kofi gone and like as is right now, would they be as high as Michigan was last year? And maybe that's part of how we graded Michigan, but all the preseason stuff is kind of BS anyways.
Yeah.
So you just wait for those things to materialize. So I'm excited to see how they address a lot of this in the portal.
Yeah, I mean, there is an excitement, right, of something new, of something different, but and also knowing that it could be a little bit more difficult, especially in the early on. Like, I think December, maybe even November at Las Vegas could be really tough for Illinois when you're playing a really, really loaded schedule. But you hope it pays off in February, March, and to be honest with you, Mike, the next season where you hope everybody basically is coming back from that team. But Brad Underwood is going to add to this team, and they have to add a front court piece, right? You're not going to count on Dane Danger for 30 minutes, Coleman Hawkins for 30 minutes. What kind of piece do you expect them to add? Like, or pieces do you expect them to add in the portal?
Yeah, I think you got to get somebody with size. Because the reality is as much as you hear great things about Dane Danger, I don't care what his years in school looks like. He's a freshman next year. In terms of playing, he's a freshman. So like you have to, you're not just simply going to be like, hey, keys to the car, we're going to play you 30, 35 minutes like they did with Kofi. That's just not going to happen. And I think that's, and also, something to understand is just, hey, it's, Kofi leaving. We can't just, it's unfair to paint Dane Danger in this light of like next one up, right? Because their games are different. Their games are a lot different. I think, Dane's a little bit more skilled and can do some more things inside out, playing around the arc and pick and roll. But I think you have to go after somebody that, you don't want to completely go away from you don't want to have zero post presence, but you also don't want to have no interior threat to where you're getting into these games and you're just kind of at the mercy of just, hey, I hope we make some outside shots. So you mentioned Ben Vanderplas. I know he's another guy that's out there in the portal. There's plenty of guys that are in that position to where you're like, oh man, like Jonai Broom. I wish his blue blood list that he has, he's cut it down to. I wish Illinois could sneak in there because he'd be a really great piece as well. Because he has that mix where he can step out a little bit, but also he's really solid and skilled as a low post threat. So, but then there's other areas you have to address too. I think you do need an experienced guard. You have to, whether that's Allian or Aline from Virginia Tech, Courtney Ramey. I know there's been, rumbles about that and Illinois having interest. He'd obviously be a really great piece. And then you just keep monitoring it because, you and I are talking here on Wednesday morning, and by Friday, there may be 3 more guys that are targets. So you keep assessing. I do like the fact that Illinois has been patient in that regard, where it's not just, hey, panic, let's go get guys because we need guys. Let things materialize a little bit. You're going to have this guy commit here, commit there. And then this prospect that maybe was thinking about going to this school, things open up a little bit and, you can kind of sneak in there at the end. So I think playing it patiently is the way to do it because you can string this thing out, probably into May at least. Yeah. So there's no reason to get all, I don't know, panicky about it, if you will. But I think there are some needs to address. And I would love to see them add a little bit more shooting because you definitely lose some. So whether that's the shooting, whether that's, like I said, a low post threat that can step out and is a little bit more skilled. I know that's asking for a lot probably because any guy like that is probably doing something or is not playing college basketball anymore. But there's guys out there that you can mold. And I think with the Kofi plan of bringing him in and developing him, you can kind of do the same with some of these guys out in the portal.
Yeah. And I think it's going to be interesting, Mike, and Brad Underwood's mentioned this as well, of if guys come back from the NBA draft and they enter the portal, is the NCAA going to give waivers to those guys if they want to transfer? And are they going to be eligible right away? It's going to be fascinating to watch all of that. So even some of those NBA draft guys, you wonder if they could become available after this and what will happen there. But I think the one thing is, given Kofi Cockburn's success, given the minutes he played, given the success Illinois has had, I would imagine this is going to be a pretty attractive opportunity for guys in the portal.
It should be. And not only that, I think that's part of it. I think that's part of the, I don't want to say people are content with Kofi moving on, but I think at a very minimum, it's a use case, right? You know, it's, hey, this is what we did. You know, we brought this guy in. He did a hell of a job for us. He was a first team All-American, and he's going off to pursue his NBA dreams. And I think there's a lot of guys that want to be under that template, right? So I think it's a big deal. I think you're ultimately in a position where, as much as maybe a transfer would say, hey, do I want to go to Illinois? Because they're just going to play through Kofi. The other side of it is, hey, you know, there's a lot of opportunity there that maybe there wouldn't have been if there was a first team All-American. And there are some guys that think that way. That would be like, hey, you know, what does it look like with me fitting in? And then there's some guys that think, hey, man, I wish Kofi was there, because that means that we have a better chance of winning a Big Ten title or whatever it may be. So depends on the kid, depends on what they want out of it. But certainly there's a void to fill, not only with the guys that are on this team that have to step up, but, you know, if you're a transfer that's looking to come in and make an immediate impact, it's kind of right there for you.
Yeah. So Mike, what do you think what this will look like next year? I mean, Coleman Hawkins, huge role. RJ Melendez, huge role. Freshman guards. I mean, obviously there's pieces to add to it, but what do you think this is all going to look like next year? Because the hope would be you can be Iowa, right? Like we mentioned Michigan, but Iowa loses Luka Garza, and all of a sudden they play a different way. They play more 5 out. They play better defensively. They're more versatile defensively, and they kind of surprise everybody. Do you think that could happen with Illinois, or how do you think it looks?
Yeah, and even with Iowa, that took time.
Yeah,
right. That took time. It wasn't really until the middle of the conference season that they started to really hit their stride and find that identity. And that's going to be the most important thing. I think there's certainly, like we talked about, there's a lot of other ways to play. And even if you have shooters, non-shooters, there's ways to combat that. And like the one way that I want to talk about it offensively is, you know, if you have a guy like a Dane Danger or Coleman Hawkins, who, if they're viewed as, you know, although they can step out and hit shots occasionally, if they are viewed as a non-shooter to other teams, okay, then how do we combat that? I think the one way that I really like, and it's part of the way that you know, the Golden State Warriors utilize Draymond Green in that sense, is if you can get a Coleman Hawkins or a Dane Danger who is at least okay at making a decision, passing the ball, then if you have teams that want to blitz, want to hard hedge, or even soft hedge, when you throw back, maybe there's a pick and pop opportunity, great. But if there's not, at least having a guy that can operate in that 4-on-3 scenario is huge. And it's the reason why the Warriors have so much success, because as opposed to just sticking Draymond in the corner, you throw that little short roll to him. Now he's got the other 3 guys, the passer and the 2 guys hedging behind him. Now it's, hey, can you make a 4-on-3 read? And I
throw Ty Rodgers into that, right? I mean, he's not as good of a shooter as maybe those big guys, but I mean, you throw him into there, he can drive the lane and dunk on you, or pass it out and make a good play.
Which is why you can get creative with it. Now, if Ty Rodgers is playing the 3 or 4, they're likely going to switch. But let's say you know Ty Rodgers, whatever he is, 6'6", 6'7". I mean, if you want to get real crazy, you throw him in at the 5, or, you know, even Coleman at the 5 or whoever. And like Ty Rodgers being a 5, having a true 5 guarding him, you know, he's going to have to rebound at a high level. He's going to have to defend at a high level, but offensively, putting him in those short roll scenarios, putting him in those roll scenarios where you're making Ty Rodgers make a decision in a 4-on-3. I like that. But now you have to have guys in that team in those 4-on-3s that are able to make the reads, that are able to flow with the ball, that are able to knock down shots, or else it doesn't matter. So that it's interesting and it's fun in that sense, to where you're like, okay, like, what is this going to look like? Because I don't think anyone knows.
Right.
And I think to a degree, the staff, I think the staff can lay it all out and have this template, but depending on who steps up into those roles, like I mentioned, they don't know in some regards. And I think there's, you know, the unknown can be scary sometimes, but the unknown, knowing that you have this first team All-American that leaves, and not having it be all doom and gloom, oh my God, we're screwed, we're going to be in the bottom half of the Big Ten. There isn't that feeling, because we've seen over the years that despite departures, they can still find a way to win. And that's a credit to the staff and Brad Underwood and the team. But this is officially, if I'm not mistaken, these are officially Brad Underwood's guys.
Yeah.
Right. For the first time. So, I mean, I think that in itself is interesting. And I think maybe it's a chance for him to get back to the way that he's historically played.
Yeah, not that this wasn't his program before, because they only played for him, right? But no, I agree. It's all guys he handpicked, and after 5 years, you kind of are recruiting the guys you want, and after winning, you're getting really talented guys. I want to ask you about, because you haven't been on since Sky Clark committed and signed. Obviously, he and Jade Nepps, and you add Sincere Harris to that, give you a ton of talent, but you have no guards, one or twos, coming back, Mike. What are the challenges that freshman guards will face right away, playing against a loaded non-conference schedule, playing in the Big Ten? And what do you think of all those guys and all that talent coming in the backcourt?
Well, it's a guards game. We've seen that. March proved that. And look, for Clark and Epps specifically, the hurdle's always going to be the physicality. That first summer, as you come in as a freshman, very rarely does someone just hit the ground running and start dominating. There's going to be adversity. There's going to be peaks and valleys like there always is. And, you got to have the right guys that are able to get through that. They're able to kind of take a big picture look at it and say, hey, this is a process. This is development. I'm sure Sky Clark and a lot of these guys, I mean, you'd be surprised. I had a lot of teammates in my career who, if you looked at me, I'd be like, that guy probably has no chance of playing in the NBA. And like, they'd come in as a freshman and be like, I want to get to the league like in 1 to 2 years. And you're like, wait, what? So, being able to have realistic expectations, not only just for the kid himself, but as fans, and as, I know coaches do that too. They want to bring guys along and protect them in that sense. But I'm not sure you have that luxury this year. I think with Clark and Epps, you got to roll them out there. And regardless, even if you go get another impact guard in the portal, because the reality is one of Clark and Epps is going to have to start. I mean, there's no question. I mean, you think it would be Clark, just given the size and kind of given the skill set. But who knows? I mean, no one really knows until they get to campus. And obviously Sky trying to get back from this knee injury as well. I think both of them are super talented in the way that they can score at all three levels. That's a huge thing. I think bringing in guys that can't shoot the ball, that can't score the ball, it limits your ability to do so many different things offensively. It limits spacing. So I think with those guys in particular, I think there's a massive opportunity for them. And I think they're going to, in a healthy way, use that as competition in practice. And I'm really interested to see, take a look at this. Take a look at this roster right now. Who's going to be the leader? Oh, I don't know. It is wide open. And I think if you're Brad Underwood, if you're the staff, making that known and just being like, hey, especially for a guy like Clark and Epps, I get you're going to be in your own world because it's your first basketball season, but we need a leader. Yeah. We need a vocal leader. We need a guy that's going to take control. And if you're those freshmen, it's a lot to put on your shoulders, right? It's a lot because not only do you have to balance that, but you have to say, hey, I have to be constantly picking up other guys, making sure the table's set. And at sometimes just kind of forgetting how it's going for you. And the more that you can release that and kind of just have that view of your team and command that, I think the better it'll be. And then back it up too. You can't be barking at guys and not doing those things too. So it's going to be fascinating. And I think for the coaches too, it's kind of what makes it fun, right?
Yeah. It's going to be really interesting to see how Coleman Hawkins responds to that. Cause he's kind of an energetic leader, he could bring that energy. I don't know if he's going to be the vocal leader, kind of the guy who does all that. Usually it's a guard. The guy I think is the most natural vocal leader right now is Luke Goody, to be honest with you. But RJ Melendez in a star role, he seems more soft-spoken with us. And I don't know how that translates on the court, but more in a star role, how does he respond? It's all fascinating, Mike. It's all so new, but in a way pretty exciting because there's a lot of talent there.
Yeah. And I think everybody's different, right? You can have the best player. I played with Malcolm Hill for 3 years and he wasn't Malcolm was a leader by what he did every single day.
Right.
What he did every single day was, when we had a summer, I'll tell this story. My freshman year or my sophomore year, Malcolm's freshman year, he comes in as a freshman that summer and we had a goal to, everybody had to make 20,000 shots that summer. Everybody had to make it. There was a chart in the locker room every single week. You had to make 20,000 shots. And there was you would walk into the locker room every week and you'd see where your bar was at compared to everybody on the team. And obviously from my perspective, I'm like, I got to blow these dudes out of the water. I'm trying to, I already have enough basically chips stacked against me. I got to just do all these other little things. And I remember after the first week, I was on pace to blow it out of the water, right? I had 3,000 makes or 2,800 makes after the first week. And I go in and check the bar and Malcolm's at 4,500 as a freshman in his first week. And he ended up making more shots that summer, with those than anyone. And that was what you knew you were going to get out of Malcolm. Now, Malcolm wasn't going to be the guy that was get in your face, get on you, vocal leader. That wasn't him. And honestly, if he, when that's not that person, then when they do it, it's hey, what's going on here? So there's other ways to lead. So I look at an RJ Melendez. If you're not going to be the vocal leader, then you got to do those other things. You got to no one's outworking me, because that was Malcolm. No one's outworking me. I'm going to bring this jug of water everywhere I go around, because I'm going to be hydrated. I take this seriously. I don't do any of this other off the court stuff. And that was how we viewed him. And I know at times probably there were people that wanted him to step up and be more of that vocal leader. But he more than made up for it in other ways. So RJ, Luke Goody, there's not one way to be a leader. So I think you can do it and still be potent at it and still kind of command the team in a way. And there's also teams that do it collectively. So, there could be some of that, but like I said, it remains to be seen.
Well, Michael Tupe, it's going to be fascinating to watch this moving forward into the offseason. Basically, total reset of the roster. 85% of the minutes are gone. 148 of 165 starts. 85% of the scoring. I think it was 80% of the minutes. It's going to be a new Illini basketball team, but still could be pretty exciting. Mike, always appreciate the insight. We'll catch up down the line in the offseason, man.
Sounds good, man.